Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Galactic Renaissance from Matagot. Galactic Renaissance is a 2 to 4 player game from the same designers as Inish and is part of the political trilogy from those designers in Inish, Galactic Renaissance, and then whatever comes next. This is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding page down below. With that, how does this game play? Well, this is primarily a deck building area control game with a whole dose of other things kind of mixed in as far as what you're trying to do, but as far as how you win, you're going to win by getting to 30 points in the game. But more specifically, you have to get to 30 points and have at least 10 points in your last round. So for example, if you have 26 points and you get to 30, you don't win. If you have 19 points and you get to 30, you do. Or if you have 26 points and you get to 36, you do. Effectively, you have to score 10 points at once and be at least at 30 in order to win the game, which means you have to set yourself up for some solid scoring turns, and the game is going to proceed slowly. You're going to start off with turns to score you a few points, and then maybe escalate a little more to turns to score you a few more points until you get better and better at the game, and better at the positioning of the game, as well as being mindful of the goals in play. There's going to be a nice hefty stack of variable goals that'll be in play, and you're going to see a total of 5 of them every single game. And if you're like Alex, there's only 3 on the table, can't you count? You're not wrong, but what's going to happen is as you hit different markers on this track, you're going to flip the first 2 goals, changing, these are 2 cards over here, you're going to flip these over here, changing the goal on the table. So effectively, the first 2 goals are slowly going to change, giving you a combination of different goals that are in play at any given time, forcing you to reevaluate your strategy as the game progresses. At first, you want to do X, Y, and Z, but then at a certain point, you want to do, Y, Z, and A, and at a certain point, you want to do Z, A, and B, etc., as far as going through the game. So you're trying to be mindful of the goals while trying to achieve that high-scoring turn. As far as the gameplay, on your turn, you're going to have a hand of cards, and the hand of cards, you're going to start the game with 3 cards, although your hand size is actually 2, and that's going to be defined by this. As you put these onto the board, you're slowly going to increase your hand size and draw cards as you go through the game. You'll be drawing cards at the end of your turn as well, but that's going to be your hand size. From there, on your turn, you're going to go ahead and look at one of your cards, and the players are going to start, this is the wrong deck, I just drew from the specialist deck. You're going to be looking at your own personal deck that's all starts off exactly the same as everyone else, although you will have a specialist in your deck of cards that is unique. So you're going to have 1 unique card, and the rest of the cards are going to be standard to everyone else, and then on your turn, you play a card. That's what happens. You play a card and you do what the card says with a bunch of caveats. So in general, you're going to play a card and do what the card says. This card over here says, explore a new planet. Move one of your emissaries from the starting planet to the new planet. This is how we're going to go ahead and take a new planet. We're going to add a new planet and a new thing to the board. Let's go ahead and set these up over here. Let's put these somewhere on the board. Let's move some of these around, make some space, and then we'll grab the matching token from this pile, and you're going to explore that new planet, and then you're going to move an emissary from your starting planet to the new planet, from a starting planet. In this case, we're over here, and because we explored from a red planet, we're going to go ahead and add a red connection to this planet, and then additionally, we're going to go ahead and move the Galactic Bunny, and put a blue token, because that's where he was, onto the planet. This planet is now adjacent to all red and blue planets. This is a good time to note that I said this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and a lot of these things are being changed, including the general quality of the components, the pieces, the various miniatures, different scoring tokens. Everything you see here very much is in prototype form. A lot of things will be changing. But past that, that's going to be what you do on the turn. You go ahead, you play a card, you do what the card says. The cards are going to do anything from exploring new planets, putting new tokens out, grabbing new pieces from your supply, putting them into play. There's going to be a bunch of things. Grabbing these various tokens over here, adding to the board. There's going to be a bunch of things that you're trying to do as far as what the cards do, and it all comes down to setting things up for your slow galactic domination, because that's what's happening in the game. There is a degree of slow galactic domination. You see, the main thing you're doing as you set up on the board is you're trying to be mindful of what the scoring goals are, and the scoring goals almost always have to do with a degree of presence on planets. The presence does change, whether you want to be, the majority player, whether you want to be the minority player, whether you want to have other tokens there, whether you want to have exactly 2 tokens. There's a bunch of ways, there's a bunch of things you're trying to do to score for these goals. So for example, over here, this one is each allied planet except your home planet will score you 2 victory points. So you want to get allied planets around your little central player board over here. Right now we have our home planet, but we have no allies, and the way to get allies is to have the most people on a planet, and then play one of your cards over here. One of your cards over here, not the senator. That we're going to have the We're going to have the ambassador. The ambassador over here is going to be when you play the ambassador if you have the most people, if you have the most people on the planet, the tokens and these tokens you have over here. If you have the most of them on the planet, you're going to go ahead and take that planet. You'll take the planetary token, which you'd have to find. You go ahead and put it into your supply, and you now have access to that ability. Plus, you'll be scoring for this card. So you're trying to look at the cards in play and trying to think through how you're going to score for them. So that's going to be the allied planets cards. For the dominance planet, each shared planet where you are leading. So effectively, you want to go to where other players are because it has to be a shared planet, which means this is a great opportunity for Pink over here to swoop in and go ahead and take this right before they go ahead and play their senator card, because playing your senator card is how you actually score. Effectively, the various cards you have are all about setting yourself up for scoring, but playing the senator card is how you actually go ahead and score. You'll move an emissary to the hub. That's going to be a single central planet that everyone has access to over here. So we're going to move an emissary to the hub, and then you'll score based on, all the various goals you've achieved. And in this case, dominance is each shared planet where you're leading. Finally, we have the foundations over here, where each planet with at least one foundation, that's going to be these guys over here, each planet with at least one foundation where you are strong. Strong meaning you have exactly 2 players on that planet. If you have 2 on the planet, you are strong, and so you're trying to score for that one as well. The combination of the various planets you have access to, the various goals you've achieved, are going to determine how many points you get, but ultimately it's all about looking at the goals and trying to slowly play cards to achieve those goals by getting onto the planets. Now, I mentioned there's a degree of area control, plus a whole bunch of other things going on here, and the area control to this game basically means that as you play through the planets, you may have noticed that there's a limited number of spots on these planets. And you might be thinking, great, when they fill up, you can't go there anymore. Except you can. You can play as many things as you want to a single planet. The only problem is, once that happens, you're going to trigger a destabilization because the planet has too many things going on, and players will go through, once you're done with your turn, you're going to go through a destabilizing round where effectively an instability is going to occur, where effectively all the players are going to have to remove tokens from the planet, alternating between either removing a token entirely or pulling back 2 people to a different allied planet where they have access to, and then going back and forth taking those actions or playing a card. Some of the cards you'll have in the game are going to give you opportunities to play cards doing an instability, doing that opportunity to go ahead and play cards in order to do some sort of effect, to stop it right away and to remove all of the players, to skip their turn, to do any number of different things, to draw new cards. So you're effectively either playing a card, removing, or moving people, taking turns back and forth until the planet is back within the underneath the required amount in order to get the stability back to the planet. So you're trying to play things, you always have the opportunity to go out to new places, but you need to be mindful that you're going to trigger yourself and other players having to take various actions to get back to a degree of stability on the planet. Additionally, from there, there's also going to be the deck building. We haven't talked about it heavily, but there's going to be deck building where you're going to be gathering cards in this deck, choosing cards, and then adding these to your deck, off into the top of your deck, and these will give you different abilities. And one of the nice things about these cards, these specialists, is you can always discard a specialist to draw another card. So it's never going to hurt your deck, because if you don't like the card, if it's not the right time, if it doesn't help you, you can always just discard it and draw another card. That's part of the turn structure. And so, a worst case scenario, it becomes a dead card in your deck that can be replaced right away. So effectively, all these cards have draw 1 and skip the rest of the card written on them, practically speaking. But past that, these cards give you a lot of fun ways to break the rules. You're going to have the various things when you're resolving a disorder over here. You're going to have these various icons you can play. These are very solid over here. Move 1 or 2 of your emissaries to the planet where the disorder is being resolved. So instead of this Microportal's expert card, instead of having to remove people, you can play this card to add people to the planet, making it more likely that you'll be the surviving player. Alternatively, you have this action here, which is move 2 of your emissaries, and this is an important part. It has this little green symbol over here, which effectively means you play another card when you're done. Very often, many of the specialists you draw and some of the cards in your hand, your base deck over here, are going to give you the symbol where you can go ahead and take another action and when drawn. And in fact, one of the benefits of having planets is that planets come into play with abilities, and the cards that let you activate planets. So for example, if we go over here, if we choose, not this one, if we have over here, activate one of your planet tokens, when you activate a planet token, you have to do what the ability says, show 1 specialist card from your hand, place it under your deck to score 2 victory points, but then you also get to flip it and take another turn. And these will activate again later. These will respawn or come back and play later. But effectively, you're going to go ahead and be able to take the action on the planet and another action as well when you go through that. And that's basically what's happening in the game. You're being mindful of the fact that you're putting new planets into play. Planets come into play with sometimes abilities on the planet themselves, sometimes abilities once you take the token. They're also going to have a different configuration of what's accessible to what based on the adjacency. As you place tokens, whenever you explore a planet, you always place a portal of that color. Like if you explore it from a red planet or red or orange, you get to choose which portal you explored from. But then additionally being mindful of the fact that there's going to be potentially another token added depending on the color. That's going to determine adjacency in the game. The planets are going to give you abilities. The planets are going to give you a random token that's going to be how many things can go on the planet. You're going to be moving, removing, adding, and doing a whole bunch of things as far as putting different tokens into play, slowly expanding these onto the board so you can start having a larger hand size and drawing cards, putting your various diplomats into play, putting the various foundations into play, trying to figure out what to do that's going to suit your scoring goals, all while you ultimately try to set yourself up for a strong senator turn where you play a senator, score 12 points, and hopefully win the game. That is basically Galactic Renaissance. Which brings me to my review, starting off with ease of play. For the most part, this game is fairly easy to teach and go through. The biggest thing is resolving disorders is a bit complicated for the way disorders work in this game, where it's kind of area control, but you can kind of exceed the limit and then pull back. That requires a bit more of an explanation, but past that, it's basically just following the cards. It's following what the cards do and say, and it's a deck building game. You're going to be grabbing cards, putting them on top of your deck, drawing those into your hand, playing cards, being mindful of a hand limit, and then trying to vie for scoring goals over here. It's a lot of things that you've seen before. It's the combination of the way those things work together that make Galactic Renaissance unique, but overall, for the most part, the game is fairly easy to get into, to teach, and to get people up and running. I would say that's as far as rules go. As far as strategy goes, you're going to be at least halfway through your first game before you start figuring out how everything kind of flows. At first, when you play this game, it is a bit of a, kind of just trying to do things without being fully cognizant of the consequences of what you're doing. But as you focus on these cards, as you understand how to set these cards up so that you can score points, you'll find halfway through your first game, and then obviously every game from there, you'll find that you start playing with a lot more intent as opposed to simply playing a card because it's in your hand. This game is not about getting more people onto the board. This game is about getting the right people onto the board and taking the right actions. It's about precision and selective choice of what you're doing, as opposed to just more people good, more things good. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking with the game, first of all, kind of relating to the point I just said, this is a game that's about control, not combat. This is a game about putting your people onto the board, being mindful of the presence of others, and trying to set yourself up for success based on the scoring goals, and then adapting to the fact that the scoring goals will frequently be changing as you go through the game. There's going to be, I think, 3 different game states as far as the way the combination of cards, or maybe 4 different game states. You're going to reveal the first, second, third. I'm not sure. You're going to be revealing a bunch of different game states as far as the way the combination of the goals come into play. And you have to adapt your strategy around them. You could have the majority on a bunch of planets only to find that the card flips over, and now you want to be the minority on a bunch of planets, and you have to adapt to that situation. This is a game about setting yourself up based on the scoring goals, but willing to move, to adapt, to place things down, to take things off, and to build the right deck of cards that will help you that'll help you react to the situations at play as you go through the game. But it's not about combat. It's not about killing others, and it's not about fighting. It's all about control and about understanding how things will play out and trying to have the right actions and take the right actions in the game. The deck building in this game is on the lighter side. There's not a ton of deck building. You might add, even in a high deck building game, you might be adding like 5 cards to your deck, but rather it's about the degree of what cards you add and how they operate within your strategy. Every single specialist card is incredibly impactful at the right time and in the right moments, and it's up to you as the player to set up those right times and moments to take advantage of them, or alternatively to just cash them into points. As you saw over here with the planet, as well as one of the cards you have in your hand, you could go ahead and discard specialist cards to simply get points out of it, which is not a bad thing and could well be the right move. Overall, the deck building in this game is all about those key moments, and the nice part is, because you only go through a small degree of cards in the game, having this giant deck of cards over here when you only see a handful of them every single game means you're always going to be constantly building a different deck, a different setup, and combined with the planets and the way those come out means you're going to be forced to approach the same puzzle from different angles every single time you go through it. The fact that you can cycle those specialists is a big deal as well to me. The fact that additionally, every single turn you have the opportunity at the end of your turn to discard a card, so you always have control over getting through cards. And a big thing that players, you're going to want to teach players this as you go through the game, discarding cards is a good thing. Trying to discard a card, just because a card could be used, does not mean it's the best card for you, and discarding a card every round could be a great way to cycling faster towards your senator to be able to get those scoring conditions scored, although of course you have to make sure that you actually set up for the scoring conditions first. Cycling to your senator when you're only scoring 2 points is not necessarily the right move, but if you currently have a good setup on the board, cycling through a few senator plays could be impactful. Getting specialists, the ability to cycle specialists, the ability to discard cards, the ability to effectively control how you go through the game. And one thing I didn't really talk about is as you play cards, this game is going to have, the cards are going to come back to your deck underneath it as you go through it. So there's going to be a degree of control for the way you set up your deck in terms of trying to say, you know what, I think this combination of playing this, then that works out well for me. Well, if so, you can set it up so that you get that same combination again and again and again. There is control over how things play out. There is control over the order and what you do. The variable goal scoring forces you to stay on your toes. That forces you to examine the same. This is no differently than the way the specialists or the planets will force you to re-examine the puzzle. The variable scoring will too. Different combinations of cards are going to be stronger or weaker depending on whether you're going for other things in the planets, whether you're going for majority, whether you want to be the minority. Things will be different in the game, and trying to adapt to that, both in the deck building as well as the way you play the cards, is a big part of the game. And the planet abilities. The planet abilities is a giant stack of planets over here, all with their own abilities, different things you can do, from drawing cards to moving emissaries to getting new specialists. There's different abilities in play. Again, just a large variety of the way you'll be able to play through all of this while trying to be mindful of the scoring conditions. As far as what I don't like in the game, there's a few things there. First of all, sometimes on a turn, you just do one thing. And that becomes progressively less satisfying, especially as you have stronger turns in the game. There are times where you play a card and you activate a planet from that card, and then you go ahead and activate a specialist card that has another activate ability. You go ahead and activate that, and then you activate that, and you've just done 3 cards in a turn, and you have a very strong, solid turn that feels very powerful. And then there's other times where you're like, I'm going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and place a foundation on a planet and just do that. Now, obviously, you can control to a certain extent for playing that as your finishing card as opposed to your starting card, but very often in the game, you're going to have very strong, satisfying, compelling turns, and then I would say just as often you have a turn where you play one card and that's your turn. Trying to plan around that, trying to get the specialist in play, and again, cycle cards to control for that, does give you more control over it happening less frequently as opposed to more frequently, but it's still going to happen, and I find those single card plays, those turns where you play a single card and that's it, while they can still be impactful, and they will happen a lot, you have to deal with it, I just find they're less satisfying, especially as you have cooler turns in the game. Additionally, I'll say the whole adjacency puzzle of the portals and the way some planets are adjacent to others, I felt like it didn't give me enough of a restriction to be an interesting mechanic. I like the idea of it. I like the idea of, hey, forget, pure adjacency. As you place things down, you have all blue planets are adjacent and all yellow planets are adjacent. I like that concept. I would say, as I played through the game, in general, having gone through this game a bunch of times, I haven't felt that that was enough of a restriction in play for me to fully feel like it's a mechanic that's taken enough advantage of itself. There are even some talents that will have them change portals, or cards that will let you interact with them in different ways, and I just never felt a strong degree of compelling strategy or decisions or at play as I go through the game. So I like the concept of what it's doing, and it's not a bad thing. It hasn't hurt my play either, but it hasn't been a significantly compelling challenge as far as managing adjacency in this game, to the point that the portal puzzle, it's okay. It doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't do anything against me. It's just something that's there. And then I will say that sometimes you can get mediocre goal combinations. Sometimes when you're playing the game, you get a bunch of cards that just don't incentivize you enough as you play through the game. What I mean by that is if you have 2 cards in play that want you to be the minority player, the one who has the least people on the planet, well, that just results in a bit of pullback. And if the third card doesn't even reward you for majority, effectively you can end up in situations with goals where players are vying for being less on a planet as opposed to being more on a planet, and too many of those, one of them is great. One of them provides a degree of nuance. To be weaker here, stronger there, it all works out. Too many of them can force players to constantly be fighting in a game of trying to be as less popular as possible, which can result in interesting play. It still forces you to examine the puzzle, it still forces you to approach it strategically, but I would say that having people race away from something so they can be less present there, and if you're doing it a lot because of multiple cards, that's a little bit less inspiring as far as the goal combinations or just the theme of the game. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, the same way I like the fact that this is a game that focuses on the strategy, focuses very heavily on the nuance of things as opposed to the combat, you might not like that. If you're looking for a combat-heavy area control game, this is not that. This is a game which combat doesn't exist. This is a game which, at best, combat comes down to you optionally removing things from planets as opposed to, moving them around the board or different things like that as you trigger disorders. But this is a game which is all about the tactical maneuvering. It's all about the navigation. It's all about the cards you play and how you try to go for the goals. This is not about fighting people in space combat. This is a politically based game of strategy and choices that have a whole lot less combat and a whole lot more control in it. but that might not be your jam. And secondly, I'd say the endgame scoring shifts can be large. The entire game structure is set up that you have to get to 30 and have at least 10 points in your final turn, but that does mean you can go through the game and feel like you're doing pretty well, and you get to 16 points, and it takes you an hour to get to 16 points, and then suddenly, you know, boom, 5 minutes later, someone scores 14 points in a single turn, and the game's over. You could and will have games with large endgame scoring shifts that you did not see coming. The way the game is set up is that there's a slow escalation of points until you get closer to the end, and then one person will just have that strong turn. You could have the game drag a little bit too. Some games you'll have people get closer to 27, 28, and then someone will get 10 points from there. But you'll also have games where someone jumps straight from 17 to 30, and that will happen, and that might be frustrating if you don't like that kind of last-minute pivot. As far as final thoughts on Galactic Renaissance, I overall really enjoy this game. This game gives me a lot of the same highs. It's from the same makers and same strategy, same trilogy as Inish is, and it gives me a lot of the same highs and a lot of the same general feelings. It gives me that sense of control, that sense of it's all about how I play things, how I build things. It's going to be focused on trying to draft cards that work for you, and sometimes you have control over the cards you're going to be deck building, not drafting, so how to deck build the right cards. Sometimes you're going to have control over the cards you add to your deck, sometimes a little less control, but the cards you add to your deck are going to be key in your strategy. Those specialists will have small, subtle adjustments to what you're trying to do in the game, and the way you chain cards together is going to give you a lot of times where you just play an incredibly satisfying turn right before you set yourself up for a senator finish where you go ahead and score a chunk of points. And again, if you could be that person who scores 14 points on your last turn, this game gives you a lot of reward for playing well, and it does so in a very subtle way that just is incredibly satisfying to go through, and is incredibly satisfying to explore new ways, especially as you go through the ton of planets, the ton of cards, and the variety of scoring goals, all of which will combine to give you different ways to approach the same puzzle every single time. For me, this is a 4 out of 5. I really enjoy what it's doing. I'm very curious to see how the final game will develop. I've been playing with the prototype the whole way through, and this is very much prototype form. You can have miniatures and improved components and a whole bunch of things in the final game. I'm very excited to dive into that. As far as other game recommendations, if you're looking for other recommendations, first of all, Inish. Inish to me is still one of my favorite games of all time. It's an incredible game that has that same feeling of political choice kind of over combat. It's not about fighting, rather it's about how you set yourself up to win the game instead. And then another game that's another new favorite for me, DEI, Divide and Emperor. That's another area control game that is far, far more about control than about combat, and about how you break the game with the way you build out your cards and the way you build out your deck. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.